Welcome. You're listening to Ask the Doulas, a podcast where we talk to experts from all over the country about topics related to pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and early parenting. Let's chat.
Hello. This is Kristin with Ask the Doulas, and I am excited to bring back my friend Sabia Wade to Ask the Doulas. Sabia is CEO of Birthing Advocacy Doula Trainings. She is an author, she's a speaker, she is a thought leader in, I feel like, so many different spaces, but in my lens of doula work, she's certainly my go-to. And Sabia is also known as the Black Doula. Welcome, Sabia.
Welcome to me. I'm like, welcome to you. Welcome to me. Because we've been having a conversation.
Yes, the conversation before the podcast is always so much fun.
Welcome to both of us.
Exactly.
But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that we finally have some time to sit down and talk about some things.
Yes, and you and I were both presenters at DoulaCon in Colorado, and your keynote was just receiving so many raving reviews. And of course, you had your book with you, which is all based on spirituality and doula work. And unfortunately, I was speaking at the same time, so I missed hearing you.
I remember.
But I got to get a photo and say hi before you left the conference. So that was amazing. But I would love to dive into the topic of spirituality and doula work and hear more about your journey as an author and how you've been able to expand your message using books as a platform.
For sure. Where would you like to get started? I love this conversation, like the topic layout so far, because I think I'll say this too as a note. I think sometimes when you are specifically like a doula of color, sometimes people get caught up in only one topic that they want to talk to you about. And you're like, I'm also multifaceted. So I really love when I'm in a space that really is like, let's talk about these topics and not just trauma.
Exactly. And obviously, I mean, Black maternal health is a major concern. We are in Black Maternal Health Week currently. This podcast will be out after, but I'm sure like a lot of your speaking and podcast guesting is so focused because you are a major thought leader in the space. But I'm open to wherever you want to take the conversation, certainly. But I am, and I feel the same way that doula work on both birth and postpartum is very spiritual, and it's hard to explain the importance of the work unless you actually do it. Like when I tell friends about how it is such an honor to be in the space and how I need to be open, and this moment can't be duplicated even if my client has 5 kids. So I need to be this open vessel as a doula and really hold space for them.
For sure. 1,000% agree. And I think like a part of this work, and I think a part of this work in the value of a doula too, and I think sometimes we undervalue ourselves and the role we play because we're so like, there's so much conversation about like, we're not medical providers, right? We're not this, like we can't act as a midwife, we can't do those things. And those roles are very much important for sure. And I think there's something so special about the role that we do hold as a doula because it's something about it that is very holistic and like in a way spiritual and not in the sense of like religious, right? Like obviously I've had clients that they have been a different, expansion of religion or whatever it looks like, but more so in the sense of spiritual as far as like wholeness, right? And I think that like we all are people and we all have like these experiences and we all have our fears, we all have our trauma, our this, or that. And I feel like as a doula, we like hold that and say to the person like, oh, it's okay that you are existing in all of this. And to me, something about that is healing, as well as just like spiritual in nature.
Yes. And it's a rite of passage. So again, whether it's baby 1 or baby 6, it is still this major life occurrence that in many cultures is treated with reverence and celebrated. And it's not just a medical occurrence.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like when you're standing there too, I feel like my gift, because I think as I've like found myself as a person and as a doula, right? Because there's a difference, I think. Like the more that we find ourselves, or the more that we work on ourselves, the more that we like do our personal work, the better we show up as doulas, and just like the better we understand how our doula approach work. Because every doula is
Exactly.
different,
Oh,
right? Like
yes.
focus on or what's important to us, or our approach, the way that we talk, the way that the services that we provide, it's just different. And I think the more I've worked on myself, understanding who I am, the more I've been able to show up for my clients in a way that is very transparent, and also in a way that is very more boundary, even for my students, right? Because I think a lot of times, like in this work, enmeshment is something that can happen so quickly. Like it's so easy to feel like me and this person are one of the same because you've had similar experiences, right? A lot of us come into this work because we've had a child, right? Or because we've had some type of reproductive health experience that made us realize, like, oh, this system is not what it should be. So
Exactly.
we
I
come
feel
into it,
like,
and then there's like this enmeshment and also this level of like looking for healing in the work, which I don't think that it's bad to want to experience a healing experience within the work, but when we make that our whole like a main reason for being here, sometimes that can transfer to enmeshment in spaces that we don't want that to actually be happening.
yes, 1,000 times yes, Sabia. I feel like doulas get into the work either based on a positive experience in birth and postpartum or a negative. And like you said, trying to heal trauma, trying to live out a better experience. But, in one of my doula trainings, I learned really that we are not accountable for our client's birth or postpartum experience. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not, I am there to hold space and to support without judgment, but my role is not to fight the system or reduce interventions, or if they want an unmedicated birth, help them achieve that. There's so much out of our control and out of our clients' control.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go in with that act of service and without trying to keep perfect stats and
Yep,
save the world, then I end up being able to support in a more holistic way.
for sure. And I think too, like I think naturally, like for me, like I am definitely like an anxiety girly. So like in my anxiety, right, like understanding that my anxiety, comes from different spaces. It comes from like myself being someone who's been in the medical space. Like I just had a hysterectomy, but that's like three abdominal uterine surgeries later, right? And like
Yeah,
and I think there's like a part of us when we get into this work, there's a part of us that we understand that there's a need for this work. So that's very clear. And then the other part is that there's this work can be very it can be very triggering for lack of better words, right? Like it can be very intense. And I think like in that all of us have anxiety because we all have really seen things. It's one thing to have anxiety over an idea, right? Like, oh, maybe birth doesn't go right or the experience is not good. But when you're a doula, you're literally in that space with people seeing things not go right. Like you're seeing things in real time not be the way, or you're seeing outcomes, and not necessarily like when I say outcomes, I don't mean just necessarily like death as an outcome, right? Like we obviously don't want that, but the outcome that we see are people who are like, I feel unsettled, I feel unsafe. This birth or this procedure didn't go the way that I wanted to. I'm having a lot of feelings about the whatever. And so we see that all the time. And like we honestly we build up, I think all of us in my mind, we all build up certain anxieties and certain stress and certain trauma, like secondary trauma. And then that sometimes comes off as now I'm trying to control the outcome of every client that I work with.
right. And we can't do that.
And we can't. Like, and sometimes I think like in that, like not being able to do that, sometimes it looks like simply, and I think there's two kind of like ways that it shows up. Sometimes it's like I'm literally trying to educate you and like, you're active in education and then we're in the birth room and things are going chaotic and I'm feeling like it's my personal failure that it's not going the right way, even though I've done everything I can do. And then there's also
Yeah,
the second part, which I think a lot of like people don't talk about often, is like when you have a client that you adore, but they're just not listening. They're not
right.
listening. And you're just kind of like, why are you not listening to me? And then it's like you feel like I want to control this. I have to listen to me. But like we have to understand that people are on their own path
Exactly. It's
and they do what
not
they want to
our
do and they
birth.
do what they yeah, and they do what they know how to do. And like in that instance, if they're not listening, when we're in the birth room, we try to direct or give as much as we can, but again, the outcome is not in our control.
And that's very freeing. When I was a new doula, I kept the stats. I felt again like a failure. There was so much weight on my shoulders. And when I was able to release that, I was able to be a much more effective doula and hold the space that was needed without that anxiety that comes with helping your client to make what you feel is the best choice for them. But it's their choice, it's their birth.
And it's like, how do we hold ourselves, right? Like, obviously, this work is about holding people, and that's great, right? But also, like, how do we hold ourselves, right? Or like, even like, how do we, as doulas, as care providers, as birth workers of any sort, how do we create a team that holds us? Because you really can't. I wouldn't suggest. I mean, you could, but I wouldn't suggest doing this work in this one-sided manner where you're like, oh, I hold everyone, right? Because even that is like, as a like a superhero personality type like me, that's
Yeah,
it's not it. You know what I mean? Like it's not like
I
at some point the
agree.
walls fall down because you're like, but who was holding me?
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, we encourage therapy and support groups for our clients, but I feel like doulas and birth workers, birth keepers need it just as much. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know if I experience secondary trauma or loss, I am talking to my therapist and also my team of doulas certainly there as a resource, and we're able to help each other process situations
Mm-hmm.
that are
Mm-hmm.
challenging.
For sure. And I think too, like our like whoever are close, because I think like for me, I have realized, especially even beyond my like, 'cause, you have your doula pals, and your doula pals, are they gonna understand like what you're going? They understand the things and you're like, oh my gosh, thank you. I don't have to explain this. But I think like one of the things that is important to do is kind of require the people in your life, your partners, your families, like whatever your family includes, your parent, whatever, like also require them to learn how to hold space as well. Because sometimes as a doula,
Exactly.
you're like, I can go to my doula friends, but what if they're not around? Can your
Right.
partner hold space for you? And not that they have to understand every piece of like what happened, right? But like I think like we have to also as doulas, and I think that's a hard thing for doulas to require people to hold space for them because we are the space holders.
Hey, Alyssa here. I'm just popping in to tell you about our course called Becoming. Becoming a Mother is your guide to a confident pregnancy and birth, all in a convenient 6-week online program. From birth plans to sleep training and everything in between, you'll gain the confidence and skills you need for a smooth transition to motherhood. You'll get live coaching calls with Kristin and myself, a bunch of expert videos, including chiropractic care, pelvic floor physical therapy, mental health experts, breastfeeding, and much more. You'll also get a private Facebook community with other mothers going through this at the same time as you to offer support and encouragement when you need it most. And then, of course, you'll also have direct email access to me and Kristin, in addition to the live coaching calls. If you'd like to learn more about the course, you can email us at info@goldcoastdoulas.com or check it out at thebecomingcourse.com. We'd love to see you there.
Exactly. It's hard to ask for help, and especially for the helping personalities, they want to serve, and it's hard for them to ask for a
Mm-hmm.
listening ear or a hug. And so I find that, especially with the postpartum doulas on my team, so many of them serve and then get depleted and then get so burned out that they need to take a break or might have health issues. And so it's a
Mm-hmm.
matter of slowing down, finding some form of self care that works for you. And
Mm-hmm.
just like with the advice that we give our clients and the resources, take them
For
ourselves.
sure. And I think too, like when we say like that, like, finding something that works for you. Like, so currently almost finished my training as a spiritual director. And basically like spiritual direction is basically, I mean, you can call it like a spiritual doula in some realms because it's really like sitting with you in spirit and not, there's no end goal. So, like with coaching, let's say you have a business coach, like the end goal is like we increase revenue by 10% by the end of the year, right? But like with spiritual direction, it's like there is no goal, right? It's more so for me to sit with you while you're figuring out things or whatever that looks like for you. And
It's so
so I said,
beautiful.
and I love it, right? Like it's definitely like I'm definitely being more open about my expansions where it's like spirituality that I've always practiced or like I've always existed this way in my like close circle, but I haven't existed this way more publicly. But I think like the reason why I love spiritual direction is that like when I'm talking with my different clients, and some of them are doulas, a lot of them are doulas to be honest, we talk about like, okay, well, what does spirituality mean to you? And I think one, we always have to go over like what's the difference between religion versus spirituality. But for me, I'm always like, spirituality starts with yourself,
Yes.
right? And I think a lot of us just traditionally by different traditions and religions, we talk about like everything starting externally, right? You have to go to church to be spiritual. You have to do this to be spiritual. It's always these external things. But I think spirituality for me is like, it starts with you. It's like, what do you put in your body? Not what do you put in your body, like, don't eat no sugar. You know what I mean? But like,
Right.
more so like what nourishes you? What gives you energy, right? What life force are you putting into your body that helps you, whether it's drinking tea, whether it's drinking water, and whether it's drinking a glass of wine. Like it don't have to be like just like it's whatever is personalized to you. And then it's like also thinking about if we're thinking about food, also what energy, what people am I absorbing? Like what is my surroundings looking like? A lot of times I tell people like nature. If you go to my house will have like 30 house plants. And it's not just because I love plants, because I do love plants. But when I look at my plants, if they're in bad shape, I know that I'm not taking care of myself. Because part of my
Right.
self-care for myself is keeping my plants in good shape. Right. So I think like if doulas, especially like care workers in general, if we were to have a better relationship with ourselves and maybe see ourselves as like these the way that we look at our clients, or we look at them as these like sacred bodies. We're like
Yes.
this is a sacred like situation. Like they are a vessel of light, of whatever. And we don't look at ourselves the same way. And like I just want to do more work around that to change that because like we need to see ourselves as those vessels and the same like vessels of light, same way that we see our clients as those vessels.
That gave me chills. Very moving. And no, I hadn't thought of our work in that way.
I think about all these things. Like we could be here for 3 hours. I know we're not going to be here for 3 hours, but like, and I'm trying to
Yes.
like, I'm being more, but to know me is to know that this is how I am, right? But I think I'm being more publicly out there with this part of myself.
Please do. We need more of this.
But it's
But it's
like
hard
we
to
I
be
guess
vulnerable, and especially as a thought leader, if you're known in certain categories, to break into yet another.
hmm
But I don't feel like this is a topic that is talked about enough, especially when it comes to birth workers and those that care for newborns. And the importance of the
exactly.
work where we don't have the village that helps in the first 30 to 40 days, depending on the culture. And women are feeling very isolated and birthing individuals. And it is a time that the caregivers need to, fill their own cups and put their own mask
hmm
on, as you say.
Exactly. But like what does that actually look like? And I think even in some of like I find this my personal experience, I do see people in different communities I'm a part of who aim to create spaces of care for birth workers and we don't show up. And I find that so interesting because when we're talking about like not saying that these, topics aren't important, but like for example, when we're talking about more of the harder traumatic parts of being a birth worker, feel like people show up in numbers. And I want that. And I want people to show up in spaces of care for themselves. Right.
Yes,
And I feel like to me that always like I find that to be so alarming because I'm like, yes, we are going to talk about trauma and all that naturally in the birth world because that's especially the way that we do birth work, right? It's about systems and people and all that. But I'm like,
absolutely.
we also just like I see people being like, oh, here's this kind of event, here's that. I'm like, here's this, here's that. And they don't show up. And I'm like, also like have this feeling of like our work has become so trauma centered that we're forgetting about the joy and the thriving and the beauty and the care and like the community aspects that will actually keep us going.
Right. And it's so essential. If you don't have that community of support, that's why I feel like when I was a solo doula, I felt like it was so isolating.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I had my doula friends, where in the agency that I created, there is that sense of community and we support each other and we do continuing education. In fact, a couple years ago, you did a training for my entire doula team on really focusing on trauma and equity and just understanding a lot of the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
and how that relates to their work, both as birth doulas, as educators, as postpartum doulas. And so, but I am very intrigued by talking with and having our doulas have a training with you on spirituality and how they can really get to that next level so we don't have the burnout in our industry that we're known for 3 years and then you're done. And I've been doing this work coming on 11
Mm-hmm.
years and I'm one of
Mm-hmm.
the rare ones in my community that have stuck with it.
Listen, it's not hard. I mean, it's not hard. It's not easy. I must say it is hard. It's not easy. And I think too, like, I think one of the things I hope for the doula world specifically is that, like, obviously we do more care for ourselves and understanding, like, what that looks like for ourselves and understand that it's going to look different, right? It's going to look
Yeah.
different for everybody. What fills me may not fill you. And, like, it's okay to have those differences. What fills you might be a specific religion. That's also fine, right? But I also hope that we are able to start healing our money trauma. That's the second thing. I feel like
Yes.
people, have like this feeling of like, if I'm giving to my community, it can't be for any type of financial gift or financial return. And people just have, like building a budget for some people or building or asking for a certain amount of money for their time. It's just very like it doesn't feel good. And so I really wish that we really hope to like help people to move that. And I think the other thing that I would love to see is also the expansion of doulas seeing themselves as, how do I say this? Like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, there's nothing wrong with obviously being a doula, being very happy in your practice, doing one-on-one clients, whatever. But I think there's so many different type of business models that can exist for doulas. And I think a lot of us feel the weight of like, we don't have college degrees. Some of us, like I don't have a college degree. Our work is not seen as this valuable thing. And so people tend to
Right.
limit themselves into
It's
what
like,
their business can look like. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it could look like so much more because you have these natural talents or these natural gifts or this idea, like how do we bring it to life? And I think that's something I would love to see more in the dual world.
yes, absolutely. And women doing women's work. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like a big project for me was trying to get doulas to be respected in the business community. So I joined the
Mm-hmm.
chamber and got on some
Mm-hmm.
policy committees and really, became a B Corp to try to get the respect that I was used to getting in the corporate and political world. And that was my own agenda. But I do feel like doulas tend to undervalue, undercharge. And then that is one of the many reasons they leave the work.
Yeah. And then it's like when we look at the world that we're in, right? Like where there's like all this monetization of doula work, right? Whether it's looking like the
Hold on a
Medicaid
second.
process. But yeah, I think like when it comes to doulas, right now we're in this like a very sensitive time where there's this like I know a few years ago when I started being a doula, it was like, even 2015, they really people were like, doula what?
Right.
Like, and even now, obviously you still get that reaction to some degree, but I think there is more awareness of us, especially because of COVID. I think like with COVID, it was like, oh, like we need doulas, right? Because we're getting into the hospitals, we don't know what's going on. There's not like it was just, obviously it's chaotic for all of us. And so
Yes.
I think like to a certain degree, it's a blessing that we're known more, right? Because then we also see different opportunities. And there's like the thing, I think that there's benefits to Medicaid and there's not benefits to Medicaid. And then there's benefits to like hospital programs and then there's not benefits to hospital programs. But the major point though is that we are something that people are seeing as valuable enough to want to recreate, right? Or want to collaborate with, or want to partner with, or wanting to reimburse, or wanting to the social capital and relationship capital when your hospital says we have a doula program, right? Now, we're
Right.
not going to say that that doula program may be good or not good, but there's also like health insurance plans who are like, we want to reimburse or we want to whatever. So to me, that's telling me that there is a understanding of our value, right? That we're not just like, like this thing. Like we're not just like, oh, this is cute. It's like, no, these hospital systems, these major corporations, these things are like, even colleges are like, how do we get doulas in here? Because that's what's being desired, right? And that's something that will bring value to us. But I'm saying that all to say that doulas are seeing that and not even equating that their value is higher than what they think it is. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes.
if hospitals and these people and whoever want to have doulas as a part of it, it's because there is a value there, whether we're saving money, saving lives, saving like doing whatever. And so it bothers me when doulas who are actually doing this work don't see themselves as valuable when these systems are saying there's value literally in why we want to have you here.
Right. And I mean, depending on the state, the Medicaid reimbursement rates may not be
Now they
high
might not
enough
respect your
to,
value. Yeah,
right?
they may not respect your value, but they're putting you there for a reason.
Yes. And certainly reducing intervention, increasing
Mm-hmm.
patient satisfaction. There are so many, studies on the benefits and advantages of doulas. And I am thankful, as you mentioned, for the awareness of the birth doula role. I think we are a long way off from the general public understanding what a postpartum doula is or a
For
newborn care
sure.
specialist and how,
Mm-hmm.
an NCS would replace that night nanny term or night nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And they're becoming a credentialed industry of their own, and postpartum doulas caring for the entire family and the their client during the recovery process after the birth and supporting feeding and all of that. I've been trying to get as many opportunities to educate on that role because, as you mentioned, especially with the pandemic, birth doulas are becoming much more known, but I still feel like that postnatal phase is an area where our clients are getting neglected, and with
Mm-hmm.
perinatal mood disorders and a lot of medical concerns that can happen after the birth and before that 6-week visit are very
I
concerning.
mean, just the like, I wish that people had more understanding, especially of that 6-week period of how much goes wrong. I mean, obviously there can be severe cases, right? Like people are dying from infection within those 6 weeks. People are dying from complications. They're dying from postpartum eclampsia. And like those kind of things too, which are very like severe cases. But when I say like what can go wrong, I'm even talking about like a parent's decision to not continue with nursing because no one's there.
Right.
Like,
It's
right? Like
there's no
that's something that's
support.
going wrong. Yeah, like or someone, the beginnings of a postpartum mood disorder starting to be present, but no one's there. Like,
Yes.
like things that we can like, that are not, I'm not talking about the biggest, catastrophes that we see on the news. Someone going into psychosis and like harms their children, everyone sees that. But I'm like, there's so many other things that happen in that time that if a
Yeah.
doula is not present, or especially because like aren't, not that families aren't present, but everyone has to go to work. You know, like we just live in this capitalist
Exactly.
society where like your aunt, your grandmother, whatever, they're still going to work. So it's like,
Right.
and even like the things that go wrong is like a partner being able to connect to their partner because there's no one there to provide the support that they need to reconnect. And now that is felt through the next year or two, whatever case may be, and so maybe possibly a divorce, right? Like those are the
Right.
things when I say like especially postpartum work, I'm like I feel like a lot of my postpartum work, well, yeah, obviously helping take care of the baby and the parent, but a lot of it was saving marriages.
I am 100% on board with that. I do feel like we can save marriages. They can get time to communicate. They feel like their needs are being
Hmm.
met, especially when the partner is, as you mentioned, going back to work very quickly. And
Hmm.
so they are both, tired and stressed. And it's hard often for our clients to ask for help if they're home and their partner's back at work.
For
And I
sure.
know when my husband went right back to work, the day after I had my daughter, he would come home and all I would want to do is talk to him. Like I needed adult interaction and he just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to relax. And I'm like, here's the baby. I want to talk. And he needed
Mm-hmm.
some time. And if I had a postpartum doula, which they weren't really a thing then, my daughter's now 13 in my community, there were very few of them and they weren't really promoted. I could have used someone to help care for me and talk to me when I'm dealing with feeding issues, which I did get support from lactation on, but and having a baby coming home from the NICU and all the overwhelm that comes with that. And
For sure.
so,
It's quite busy. And I think too, like and I think doulas, sometimes you come into this work, you're like, okay, I'm gonna have a birth client, whatever, and we're gonna work together for, 6 months to a year, whatever that looks like. And then, we're gonna have some type of relationship. But I think also the role of like doulas in of any form is like you find out that you're sometimes like a lifetime buddy, like now
yes,
you're helping them make the decision or helping them to think through the decision of do they even want to have more kids,
right.
right? Or they're pregnant, they didn't expect it and they feel a way about it. They're like, I'm not exactly happy, right? Like it's like, but like,
So
and
many
I think
things.
back to that and I'm like, who else would they have talked to?
Yeah, because I mean, sometimes some of these topics can't be openly discussed with friends
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
family members, and everyone has their own idea of how things should be done. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
often well meaning advice, but to have someone who is a non medical expert in the home to be able to run things by and have that emotional support as well as the resources.
That
So
part.
helpful. But I
I love
would,
that. I
as
think I love that part. Like now in my like, I don't know, I'm not saying I'm not
yeah,
that old, but in my like path where I'm at now, I really love holding space for those like conversations. Like I love holding space for like the people that have had kids and they're like never again. Or they or the
yes,
people who are like, I want to have 10 more, but like how can I do that? Because there's these social determinants that say that I shouldn't do that, right? Because if you don't have a certain amount of money and you want to have 5 kids, people judge you for wanting to have 5 kids
absolutely.
and not being like super well off, right? Like I love
Yeah,
having those those kind of, I don't know, conversations that require a lot of nuance and require a lot of depth, I guess, and just like sitting with people and being like, well, what do you think today?
I
Like,
love it too. And a topic that comes up at that 6 week appointment is
mm-hmm,
contraception, family planning. So you
mm-hmm,
do have to really sort some of that out. And there is a lot of judgment on that, the one and done families of not wanting to add on. And also, as you had mentioned, the larger families. So
mm-hmm.
dealing with some of that when you have a doula there to talk through whether you want to be finished with your family or you would like to plan for another, but how do you budget that? How do you
Mm-hmm.
work that out if you are working career wise? Because as you know, women get set back for each time they have kids in
Yep.
advancements, promotion. It's getting better as far as maternity packages and
Mm-hmm.
mentoring for women in business, but we're not there yet. There's so much work to be done.
There's so much work to be done. And I think like one of the things that we do as doulas is basically to say like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So what do you want to do?
Yes,
Like, so what do you just want to do? Because we can talk about the pros and cons of things for for your personal health, your personal whatever. But I think, specifically when we're talking about like women specifically, like it's just kind of like I think we hold space, and I think this is kind of like the spiritual part of it is that we hold space for like, what do you want to do? What does that mean for you
yes.
in your life? Is that in alignment with you? How do we work through, your fear of rejection? How do we work through this thing? Because as doulas, I feel like we want people to live whole, happy lives.
We
And
do.
that's just
That's
like
the
the place that we
goal.
hold.
Yes. And feel like they made the best decision for them in that moment. So, again, my
Hmm.
goal as a doula similar to yours. I don't want to be the influencer or be someone who wants someone to give birth or parent the way I did or feed my children the way I did. And so there are so few people like doulas in that we don't have an agenda. Even providers sometimes have an agenda.
Oh yeah, for sure. 1,000%. And I think like to be fair, like, not every doula is gonna have the same approach or the same
True. Yeah.
vibe, right? Like I think like being a doula or being a midwife or being whatever doesn't make you obsolete from harm. But I think that like part of the work that you're doing, part of the work that I'm doing is also like creating more understanding of like ideally what a doula would be doing for you. Like, ideally, they wouldn't have an agenda. Ideally, they'll be listening to you and what choices you want and giving you, unbiased information on what those things can lead to or, pros and cons and so on and so forth. And, sometimes you won't come across that. I think sometimes you'll come across someone who's harmful, but I think the work around like whether it's writing or podcasting or any type of media is to like put the message out there more so that when a birthing person comes in contact with a doula, they know what they're looking for. They know what they're not looking for within that doula.
Exactly. Yes. So we are running out of time, Sabia, but I would love for you to share some of the top tips from your book. Let us know how to purchase that and how to connect with you in all of the different, social media, websites.
Universes.
Yes. So you're everywhere. So.
And I would say my biggest thing, and I talk about it a lot in the book, is like everything starts with you. So like if you have a goal of wanting to be a doula, or if you are a doula, like it still centers you. What is your well-being? What traumas are at the surface? What work are you doing for yourself? What are you putting in your body? What are you listening to? What are you reading? All of it starts with us. Just as much as we, push that our clients are these vessels or whatever, we are also these vessels, and like having that mutual respect for our clients and like wanting to show up for our clients in the ways of showing up for ourselves, right? That makes us even better doulas and people in general, actually. So I would say that. And then Birth and Liberation, my book can be found anywhere. I have no preference on where people buy it. And then as far as finding me, I'm most available or most like social on Instagram. So Sabia Wade. And I'm in other places too. And of course, my website, sabiawade.com, is always the best way to see like what's going on or reach out to me for different things.
And I know you've got book links there. You're on Amazon. You're in some
Yeah.
bookstores.
I know, but I know some people are like, I am not purchasing from Amazon, which I obviously understand. So like, like, please feel free to buy, purchase whatever, and also just a reminder that the book is available in audio version because accessibility is important.
Yes.
So that's also available for folks who would like to utilize that option.
Thank you so much for the important work you're doing. I hope that, again, this focus on spirituality, and I know you're torn in so many directions, but please keep getting that message out and let me know what I can do to support you, Sabia.
Thank you.
And we will plan to keep our conversations going. You're always one of my favorite guests.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Doulas. For more information about Gold Coast Doulas, visit us on our website, goldcoastdoulas.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Thank you. Remember, these moments are golden.